So what do you guys think of the speakers today? What about yesterday? So I think that's a big thing with this conference. We've been blessed to have great speakers, and each year our speakers from last year come back as well. So we had great keynotes, and I think Jurgen Appelo is going to be a great person to round out the day. So Jurgen, I first met 2 or 3 years ago at the National Agile Conference in Florida, and people said, "You got to meet this guy." And I'm like, "All right, who's this guy?" I'm busy. I got to go have a beer or something. So I go over and I'm meeting with Jurgen and so forth. He's got a book coming out. And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. Maybe I should read that sometime." And we talked for a while. I got really intrigued with what he was doing and how he was looking at some of these practices for leadership and management, not just for teams. And read his book. So if you haven't read Management 3.0, you should. And I'm sure after meeting Jurgen, you will want to. So without further ado, Jurgen Appelo.
Thank you. I always want to start with an apology. I'm Dutch. I'm sorry. Okay? No, seriously, because there is this part of the brain that is called cognitus filterus, that sits right between what you're thinking and what you're saying, and Dutch people don't have it. It got stripped out of our DNA some centuries ago. So you can imagine what happens whatever we think, we say. That's how we are. Some people find it offensive. For us, it's just honesty. It's just the way we are. It's different for other people. Like for the French, for example, that thing that occupies their entire brain. Sorry. You see? This is what I mean. All right. So, okay, well, let's get started. This talk is called How to Change the World, and I think it's necessary to start with a European geography lesson. This is Europe. Some of you call it the old world. Other people see it as a nice picture to use for target shooting practice here in America. But this is Europe, 750 million people, and I like it. I like it there. It is a bit hard sometimes because everyone is fighting, but that's part of the fun. And I live here in the Netherlands. It's a very, very small country with 17 million people. It is so small that most of us have learned to sleep standing up. But I live nowadays in Belgium. That's a small one underneath. I'm not using the word country. Well, actually, officially it is a country. But in practice, it is a very big traffic accident that formed its own government. So that's where I live. Remember, the Netherlands, Belgium. I will do some more of a geography lesson later in this talk. All right, let's start. People like me telling about my failures. I have failed for about 15 years. Sharing failures is part of being agile. We learn from failures, and one of my biggest failures was, well, actually started with a little success. I had a website that was doing quite well with information about computer games. That was the end of the 90s. And I made quite a lot of money through advertising and sponsorship. So I thought, let's turn this into a startup. That was the upwards slope of the internet bubble. And I created a fabulous business plan, full of graphs and diagrams that all went up. All expectations for the next few years, profits and revenue and number of people and my ego, everything went up. And I was actually able to secure some financing from informal investors. They put 1 million euros into our little startup, and we were quite successful, my team and I. at spending that money to the last euro. Unfortunately, we didn't find any customers. So that was a bit of a problem. But hey, I already had new ideas. I had an idea to start a disco dance music at some point, but I failed. I had an idea to write a novel, but I failed. I had an idea to be a cartoonist, and I failed. I had about 15 failed relationships behind me. All failures, and some of them businesses. I remember at one point I was talking with a prospective employer, and I said, you have to know that I basically destroyed all the previous businesses where I worked. I'll be honest about that. I'm Dutch. That's what happened. Actually, they gave me a new idea. I said, why don't you hire me and make me work for your competitor? I will annihilate them. Well, so this went on and on for 15 years. I actually remember sitting on the couch being totally depressed and demotivated, thinking that the rest of my life would look like that. But then things started changing. And actually this was published just 1 month ago by InfoQ, the most influential people in Agile in the world. They did some very complicated calculations with all kinds of metrics. And what do you know? I'm number 6. Yay! Awesome. So, oh, thank you. Now, of course, if I had not been on the list, I would have dismissed this as complete nonsense. But now that I am on the list, I can only assume that's pretty accurate. Notice that most of the others are Americans, for good reason, because lots of good ideas come from this continent. So I have a blog, noob.nl, which is doing quite well. And that led me to sign a contract with a publisher for this book. It was just referred to. Management 3.0, it has been doing quite well. Some say it is a bestseller. I can only assume that they're right. I have a course, Management 3.0, which is doing quite well. I do it all over the world. 60% of the people, the attendees, give it a 9 or a 10 on a scale of 10. And I do it all over the world, also all over Europe. Except for this country, I'm afraid, Greece. I haven't been there yet, which is probably the problem. Hey, Chris told us this morning to take responsibility. I'm taking responsibility. I should have gone there earlier. It's too late now. So, there was sometimes people ask me, how do you do that? Because now you have a couple of successes in a row. You've been a pathetic, miserable failure for 15 years. Well, actually, they don't phrase it like that, but I think that's what they mean. And now some of the things that you do are actually working. How do you do that? And I said, I don't know. Maybe I finally learned a few things after so many years of failure. And actually, when I do my courses, I tell people to come up with their own problems in their own organizations. Tell me, what is it that you struggle with? And people tell me, well, how do I make the rest of the organization more agile? Or how do I motivate my employees to develop themselves some more? Or how do I convince customers that they should accept Scrum, etc., etc., etc. It's always the same question. How do I convince other people that they should be changing their behaviors? Because I know what they should be doing, but they're not doing it. So I have this good idea, but I want to be successful at influencing other people and change their behavior. Of course, you cannot really make other people change their behaviors, is what people always tell me. I agree. But I also cannot really make people laugh. But I'm trying, right? So I'm trying very hard. But you can do the same with change management. You can at least give it a try. Try to influence people. And that's very important because apparently, according to the statistics by version 1, in their report that they publish every year, this time was the 6th time, I believe, early this year, and it's every year more or less the same barriers that they report in terms of agile adoption. The main barriers to agile adoption. The biggest one is organizational culture. There's apparently not a good fit with what Agile demands of an organization where Agile is implemented. Also the availability of the people with the right skills and a resistance to change. Chris referred to that earlier this morning. It is perceived as a resistance to change. So this is all change management, a very important topic. So how do you change a social complex system? That is what this talk is about. And I stole all the ideas from a number of different sources. These are the books that I found particularly interesting. Quite good change management books. And I discovered the 4 facets of social change, as I call it. And I applied the Mojito method. The Mojito method is turning something that consists of pretty boring ingredients into something new that is amazing. So this is the Mojito method applied to change management. The ingredients already existed, but I'm just stirring them up, and the result, I think, is pretty amazing. It works quite well. Let's see what we have here. So, consider the system. That's the first part. Be a systems thinker. Consider the individuals. That's the second part. I will go into details in a moment. Consider the individuals. They have to change at the local level. Consider the interactions between the people. It's a social network. And then consider the boundary, the environment in which the self-organizing system is surviving. All right, the first one. Consider the system. Dance with the system, I've called it. Well, there's a model for that, the good old PDCA cycle. There have been many versions afterwards. We call it inspect and adapt sometimes. The Lean Startup movement calls it build, measure, learn, yada, yada, yada. It's always the same thing. It is doing things iteratively, right? That's also being part of Agile, and is also being a good change agent. You have to do things iteratively. And I agree with Chris, he said it this morning, the traditional change management books always have this sequential approach. The 8 steps, and step 1 is the goal, and then step 8 is we celebrate, we have changed the organization, done. No, that's not how it works. It never stops. It should be a cycle. So that's why the PDCA cycle is a good one. And I collected a number of questions from those books that I read, a number of good questions to ask yourself as a change agent. If you want to convince people to start TDD or start pair programming, or convince management that they have to change their behaviors, etc., etc. First questions, what is your goal and where are things going well? They did that with the Agile Manifesto. 70 people got together, they analyzed what was going well for them in their projects, they saw some similarities, and they promoted that and gave it a name, Agile. That's what worked quite well for them. Another example. This is Germany. It's the big ugly one in the middle. I was at a conference in the southern part of Germany last year in February, the Play for Agile conference. Great conference about playing games in Agile context. And southern part of Germany. It borders on Austria and Switzerland. But there was nobody from Austria and there was nobody from Switzerland. That was a pity. There were 4 people from Canada. I always see Canadians in Europe. J.B. Rainsberger, Janet Gregory, Robin Diamond, Michael Sahoda, it never stops. I think there's some kind of wormhole between mainland Europe and Canada, because actually I see Canada as another European country. It's a European country on the wrong continent. I've been there, it's Europe, really. So they feel lost, I think. So I think they have created a few wormholes and then pop up in Europe all the time. So lots of Canadians there, but nobody from Switzerland, nobody from Austria, nobody from France. So with that said, we have to collaborate more across borders in Europe. And that's how we came up with the Agile Lean Europe network that I will tell you some more about later. So the vision was pan collaboration in Europe. Everyone is focusing on their own little countries. We have Agile Holland and Agile Finland and Agile France, and nobody knows each other. Always focusing on their own little countries. So great vision, good goal, and the idea was to get together in a bar and start doing things. It worked well, but as I said, more about this later. Then, What are the crucial steps? That's the do part of the PDCA cycle. So we now have the goal, we know what we want to achieve, then start introducing small practices. Small steps, this is what the books emphasize. Don't make it complicated, start with small steps in the right direction. How do you do that? Well, here's an example. Agilists, the Agile gurus, have come up with this very simple idea of putting up a board with sticky notes. How simple can it be? Here's a nice example. I don't know if you can read it, but it says cake and beer there. In the first column, some sticky notes with beer in the first column. So apparently this is somebody who's at the start of a party and then planning the amount of consumptions, beers and cakes that he is able to consume, and then once the party is going on, it moves everything to the next column and the next column, and then at the end of the party, if all the beers are in the last column, it shows to the host, look, everything is done, and we call that Scrum, right? There are other people who have a different opinion on it. They say you shouldn't be estimating all that kind of stuff. You should just drink beer as fast as possible, but only one beer at a time, and we call that Kanban. It's limited beer in progress. But it's more or less the same thing. It's a very simple step. I've seen it around me. People put up a board, put sticky notes up, and then things start changing because it's a very small step to make. Quite successful. Then, how do you get feedback and how do you measure results? That's the check part of the model. Well, I have this feedback door that I often use in my courses. I call it the happiness door. It is basically a feedback wall combined with a happiness index. People think it's a lot of fun, and I did that originally because I wanted to have that feedback faster after the first day in my course. I even did it at lunch on the first day. But that turned out to be too soon, so now I changed it. I now ask feedback at the end of the first day. That's useful for me because sometimes there are some comments on the feedback door that tell me what to change on the next day that people otherwise don't dare to tell me or something. That's always quite interesting. So ask feedback faster. And then how do you accelerate results? You have to be prepared to do this again and again and again. A nice example that I have is the tablet computer. It is, according to my sources, the 15th attempt at creating a tablet computer, the iPad by Apple. All the previous ones failed, including Apple's own Newton. But I'm quite sure that they learned, they never gave up, because the idea was good. Just have to try again and again. And of course, there's a good time and place. Probably it could only be a success when touch technology became available. But lots of experience had to build up over time. So this is the system. Just be a systems thinker and understand that change is something that never ends. It goes on and on and on. Because as Chris Avery told us this morning, you have to keep poking it with ideas. He referred to Donella Meadows. We cannot figure systems out, but we can dance with them. I love that metaphor. So you have the system, and over there, that's your goal. So you start dancing with the system. And hopefully, if you're a good dancer, you're able to move in that direction. But maybe the system does this, and oh my God, I don't want to go in that direction. I want to go over there. So learn to be a better dancer, and then you go in that direction. Maybe you change your mind. Halfway you think, oh, there's a much cooler goal over there. So whoop, that direction you go. This can go on and on and on. It can involve some bruised toes and elbows and stuff, but I like that metaphor. Actually, Brian Merrick, one of the signatories of the Agile Manifesto, was in Spain last year. This is Spain. He was in Spain at the XP conference, one of our major conferences in Europe, and he was using the same metaphor. That was fun. He made everyone stand up during his keynote, and he taught us how to dance the tango with the partner next to us. Well, the partner next to us was Lasse Koskela from Finland. This is Finland. Spain, Finland. And so he had us made the dance the tango, and he made us dance the tango, and I was dancing the tango with Lasse, and I was very, very glad that it was Lasse, because people from Finland are very, very quiet people. So I had assumed that he wouldn't tell anyone. Unfortunately, now it is on his Twitter page, I once danced the tango with Jurgen Appelo. It's over there. I checked this morning, it's still there. Lesson learned, never dance with people from Finland. All right, so if you have some challenges, like I want my organization to be more agile, then I have some questions for you. What is your goal? Where are things going well? Learn from those. And what are the simple, crucial steps that you can start with? When and where do you start? How do you get feedback? How do you measure results? And are you prepared to do this again and again and again in a never-ending cycle? That's being a systems thinker applied to change management. Makes total sense to me. Part 2, consider the individuals, because people have to change at the personal level. And that's what this model is about. ADKAR, again, I stole it from somebody else, like I do with everything. So this is the ADKAR model. And it says it starts with awareness. Unfortunately, that's where many people stop. They simply send other people messages like, we really, really have to change. Like they send messages, starting next week, everyone should be on time in meetings. Or turn in your timesheets before 5 o'clock. And that's it, as if that's going to help. No, it won't. Because that's just creating awareness. There's a lot more that you need to do. For example, our government wants us to stop smoking. So they have these messages on packages of cigarettes. Does it help? No. Doesn't help. It's just step 1. You have to do more. So the second part is desire. That consists actually of 2 questions. Can you make things feel urgent, and can you make it feel desirable? Like, for example, my father last year wasn't feeling very well and went to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, I estimate that you have only 3 months to live unless you start changing your dietary habits right now, which he did. But he knew for years that he wasn't eating healthily. He knew that, but he never did something about it because it was only important but never urgent. Well, when the doctor says you only have 3 months to live, then suddenly it is urgent. Right? So basically you should have something similar. You convince your team members we have to do TDD, or in 3 months you'll be dead. That makes it urgent. I can make sure that you're dead in 3 months. So that's making it urgent, but making it desirable is the other aspect. I have this little model. I collected some research into intrinsic desires, intrinsic motivation. Dan Pink wrote a book about it, but also self-determination research and some other books. And I came up with this list of 10 intrinsic desires. I call it the champ frog scale. I have no idea what champ frogs are, to be honest. But it's a very nice acronym. The champ frog scale. I'll give you an example. This is one of the best Dutch inventions ever. It is a little fly in a urinal. I don't know if, has anyone ever been at Schiphol Airport? Yeah, have you? The men among the room, have they seen the little flies in the urinals? Yeah, I see somebody nodding their heads. Yep, yep. So you can imagine they had a little problem at Schiphol Airport in the males' restrooms. So somebody came up with the ingenious idea of putting a little fly in the urinal. And now this might be hard for some of the people here in the room, but imagine that you're a man. Okay? Just try, okay? And you're standing there. And you see that little fly just before you want to relieve yourself. You think, am I able to flush away the fly? That's curiosity. That's 1 point on the champ frog scale. Right? Some people might think, am I able to hit it right between the eyes? That's mastery. Some people might think, haha, say goodbye to the world, little fly. That's power. That's 3 points on the champ frog scale. That's a very, very good score. So my point here is, if you try to introduce a change, you have to do something to it that may be completely irrational, but somehow hooks it into people's intrinsic needs, their intrinsic desires. Very simple example, we feed medicine coated in sugar to children. Then they want to eat it, otherwise they don't. It's more or less the same thing. Remember, this is in the Netherlands. This is where I'm from. Very, very small country. It's so small, we have 2 highway exits, and you should use only the first one. The second one drops you right off in the North Sea. Very small country. This is Sweden. This is Norway. Sweden, Norway. Sweden, Norway. As you can see, they're quite close and big. Not many people were living there. And they have this. This happens with neighboring countries that are a bit isolated from the rest, right? They pick on each other. Whenever I'm in Sweden, I make fun of the Norwegians. Whenever I'm in Norway, I make fun of the Swedes. Always great success. So I actually propose that we start shipping the special versions of this toilet to Sweden and Norway. But instead of the little fly, I would ship the ones to Sweden. They should have a miniature version of the Norwegian flag. And vice versa, of course. All right, Sweden, Norway. Knowledge, that's the third one. Who is going to teach them? Who is going to assist them? Because maybe people are aware of the need for change. Maybe they desire the change, but they don't know how. Then we need to help them. That's what we're good at in the Agile world. We have gurus and experts and trainers and senseis and whatever we want to call them. We do that all the time. So no real problem there, I suppose. Then the fourth part is ability. Even when people know how to change, I've seen that myself. Some teams wanted to apply TDD, but they felt that they couldn't. Because, oh my God, and a deadline on Friday, and this and that, and there was always something that was blocking them moving forward. So you have to address those obstacles. Move them out of the way. Make sure that there's a path of least resistance. The example that I use here is this button on Amazon, buy now with one click. They removed all the obstacles, made sure that it's only one click to purchase something. I've been warning people for this button for half a year, and you know what? Last month I clicked on it when I wanted to store something in my wish list. I clicked on buy now with one click. Oops, I bought the book. I'm glad it was a book and not an airplane. So they removed all the obstacles and made it very, very sure that very, very easy and sure that people can move in the desired direction. Next part, what are the short-term wins and what makes it sustainable? Because even if people move forward, then sometimes they slow down and they fall back into old habits, right? You know what I mean. You promised yourself at the end of the year, New Year's resolution, next year I'm going to work out more, right? Yeah, I see some people nodding their heads. Are you still working out? No, that's what I thought. Same with me. So we have these good ideas, and we start in January. That they tell me the fitness schools are always full in January, right? And then in February, things go back to normal again. So it is unsustainable. What you have to do is make sure that it's sustainable. For example, what some people do is make sure that they do this with friends. They make it social. They hook up their Nike shoes to their smartphones and start working out together with people across the world. They turn it into a game. Gamification is all the rage in the last few years. So this is about making things sustainable. And also adding small successes, generating small successes. This is how I was able to write a book, because I did it 2 times before and I failed. But then I decided to start with a blog. Small successes. One small text at a time. And I got some feedback and a compliment here and there. And ooh, nice, a compliment. I'll write another one. Maybe I'll get another compliment. Well, this is a small success, and this goes on. And before you know it, you have a book. That's how it works. So you build a habit with small steps and try to reinforce it. So sending a rational message is not enough. You have to make sure that you also work on desire and knowledge and ability and reinforcement. So if you have some kind of challenge, like I want my developers to educate themselves some more, well, I have some questions for you. How will you communicate and set an example, and can you make things urgent or make it feel desirable? Hook it up into those intrinsic desires. Who will be teaching? Is there a sensei available? What makes it easy? Can you remove all the obstacles? And what are the short-term wins so that you make it sustainable? Those are the questions you have to ask yourself. Number 3, stimulate the network. If you try to have people change their behaviors, it is like injecting a virus, a behavioral virus into the system, and you want that virus to be copied across the network. Well, there's a model for that too. Surprise, surprise. It is the adoption curve by Rogers. A very well-known model for innovations and change. And it consists of a few different kinds of people. Actually, I added a group. The initiators, that's the change agents themselves. That's where it starts. That's you. You have to ask yourself some questions. Like this guy, for example. I think some of you might recognize him. He's a change agent. He had this idea of changing the world. It earned him a Nobel Prize. I think it was unfair. I had the same idea. He got a Nobel Prize for the idea of changing the world. And in his first term, he got the prize. It makes me wonder what he gets when he wins his next term. Probably the Academy Award. Anyways, sorry. Me being Dutch. Yeah, right. Okay, so he is a change agent, but very important, that's my point here, he has some people helping him out. He has some shoulders to cry on. I see some very strong shoulders there in the room. You should not be on your own. That's the message in the books. Make sure that if you're trying to change an organization, you should not be on your own, because sometimes it is very hard and can be demotivating. You have to support each other, trying to change the world around you. But then we get to the real curve. Who will be the innovators? Those are the people who are most eager to start with what you're suggesting, with whatever it's pair programming or continuous deployment or whatever. They can't wait to get started with that crazy, fantastic idea. They're the ones who stand in line for hours to purchase the next thing that comes out of the Apple factories. You have to treat them well, those innovators, because they are the ones who get that whole wave started. Then you get to the early adopters. That's an interesting group because there are probably some leaders among them. They are not prepared to stand in line for hours to get an iPad, but they're very interested in what's happening. And once they see what the innovators are doing, then they start broadcasting it all around them. Once they see that some people are doing continuous deployment, and think, that's interesting, I'm going to look into that. But because they are the hubs in the social network, they have a lot of influence. So you have to know who they are. Who are the leaders that you have to get on your side? But then it gets difficult. It gets difficult because you arrive at the majority. And basically the majority doesn't care. The majority has different needs. The majority is not interested in that new device from Apple just because it is from Apple. They just want to see a movie on the train with whatever enables them to do that. Right? That's a different kind of need. Same device, but different need. So you have to figure out how is the majority different. For example, with me, I know that my courses are still only attracting the innovators and the early adopters. Right? I'm not there with the majority yet. I'm quite sure I will have to do things differently to make it interesting for the majority. But that's something that I have to solve myself, and you have to solve that too. And they say there's a chasm in between the early adopters and the early majority. Many ideas, many new products, many services drop in the chasm and are unable to climb out because people only thought about the innovators and the early adopters. Well, those were the easy groups. You have to think about the next ones. Then the skeptics. How do you deal with the skeptics? Those are the ones who think, oh, that's never going to work. They thought, the iPad makes no sense. It's 4 iPhones taped together. That's what I thought. Now I have one, well, actually the competitor, but same thing. Now I have a tablet computer, so now I'm convinced, but I started being very skeptical. Ha ha ha, what a silly idea that is. That's a huge, who's going to walk around with a huge phone like this? Makes no sense. So, but the point that the books make here is you have to listen to them, because the skeptics give you very useful information. And you may not be able to convince them now, but if you use that information, you're able to tweak your message and find a new approach, and then you'll be able to change them next year, perhaps. So listen to the skeptics well. Then the difficult group, the laggards. The laggards will do anything they can to resist. They will never, never agree with you that TDD is going to work or whatever it is that you're trying to introduce. Basically, there's only one thing that you can do and hope that they die. Or leave the company or whatever. The books are unanimous on this, not about the dying part, but ignoring them for as long as possible. But, and this is important, do not stop too soon. Because sometimes people cry victory when they're here. When they have convinced the majority, they think, oh, we're almost there. It's now like sliding down the scale. There's no problem anymore. Nope. I have stories, I heard stories from people, from coaches, agile coaches that left the organization when they convinced the majority and everyone's doing a good job, and then they went to another customer, and then the laggards rise. And they undo all the work that has been achieved so far, and the whole organization reverts back to their old patterns, their old behaviors. It's quite interesting if you're an agile coach, because you can start all over again with the same customer, but that's maybe not what you want, right? So don't stop too soon, or things will blow up. Don't give the laggards a chance to undo everything. All right, so this is the interactions. The behaviors are transmitted as if it is a virus in a social network, and you have to follow how far the contagion is, so to speak, to stay within the metaphor. So if you have some great challenge, like you want people to use your products or services or whatever, here are some questions to consider. Are you committed? And do you have some people working with you? Are you not on your own? Do you know who the innovators and early adopters are? You have to analyze that. And how is the majority different? How can you reach those? Different kind of message, different approach. Prepare for that. Also listen to the skeptics. Don't start arguing with them, but listen to their concerns. You can use that information later. And don't cry victory too soon, or you will have a relapse and can start all over again. 4, last part, change the environment. This is interesting. It is a self-organizing system. Several people have referred to complex adaptive systems. It's one of my favorite topics, complexity science. I know, it is. They are complex systems that we're dealing with. It is in the original books by Jim Highsmith and Ken Schwaber and others. They refer to complexity science as one of their sources of inspiration. So if you have a team or an organization or whatever, they are complex systems. And Ilya Prigogine, Chris referred to him this morning also. He was the one who found out that systems can only self-organize if there is a boundary. No boundary means no self-organization, because there's nothing to self-organize within. So that boundary gives us an hook, because we can use that boundary to steer self-organization. Because what happens inside depends on what the boundary looks like. So how can you modify that boundary? Well, there's a model for that too. The 5 I's. Actually, it is the 4 I's, but I added one, infrastructure, because I think it's a little bit different, and because that now enables me to tell you that it is my model and not somebody else's model. That's useful. So this is my 5 I's model. And it starts with information. This is what we're good at. Information radiators. Just put up things that broadcast information back to the system, and that will impact its behavior. It will adapt to that information. So how can you radiate information and use communication to your advantage? Here's a nice example. I read in Wired magazine just a few months ago that these radar systems that simply broadcast back to drivers how fast they're going, they work better statistically than police cars hidden behind billboards. It's true. They simply show you This is the speed that you're supposed to be going. This is what you're doing. Figure it out. It helps. In many cases, people slow down. Oops, I didn't know I was going 44. So let's reduce it. It works in many countries. I was in Italy. They said it doesn't work there. This is Italy. It's at the bottom. In Italy, it doesn't work. They told me, well, our drivers will then, if they see this, they'll start experimenting and check if it can show a third digit. That's what they do in Italy. See if it can show a third digit. So for this reason and some other reasons, we're now discussing in Europe if we can change the world and move Italy over there. It would give a whole new meaning to New York pizza. So, but it can work. In many organizations, it can work. Information radiators, I have heard of teams that have these red sirens going off whenever somebody broke the build, and then some flash display says, he did it. And then that person has to wear the fluffy bunny ears for at least a day or something. That's using information radiator to show everyone this is what happens when you misbehave. It works. Identity is the second I of the 5. Let's see how identity works. This is a picture of a typical Dutch family. Yes, I'm afraid this is what my fellow countrymen do whenever there's a big international football match, soccer match for Americans, but it's actually called football, not soccer. When there's an international football match and at the 30th of April every year when we celebrate Queen's Day. For some reason, we celebrate that we have royalty. I don't know why, but I make sure that I'm out of the country on that day. So they go around walking in the weirdest clothes, referring to Dutch traditions, and all in orange because it is the national royal color. And basically, this is what is expected of you. This is peer pressure at work. Because if you don't walk around like that, you must be weird, right? This is normal people dress up like this on 30th of April. This is peer pressure at work. And this is very useful if you can achieve that. Actually, I wrote a blog post a few months ago that was very, very popular. I called it the T-shirt test. If your organization has T-shirts and your people, your employees are willing to walk around with that T-shirt, hoping that other people notice that is the organization they're working for, then you pass the T-shirt test. I know plenty of people who want to be found dead in a T-shirt or anything with a symbol of the organization that they're working for. Then the T-shirt test is not working, right? Identity is not working. Because if identity is working, then you can attach practices to that identity and say, well, if you're working for this organization, that means that this is the kind of behavior that we expect from you. And then people will comply, but only if the identity is working. Of course, this is a picture of the Dutch, but I've seen many pictures like that of people in other countries, right? We all do that. I found a picture of a typical family in Canada. All right. I use that too. I use that identity thing because I said I was trying to mobilize Europeans and get them to collaborate more. And as Brian Merrick said in Spain, there's no better way to get applause from Europeans than making a joke about Americans. Then everyone says, that's a funny joke, just because it's about Americans. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. So Brian Merrick was cracking jokes about Americans, getting applause all the way. And that was the identity thing again. And I used that as well to my advantage. I said, and this is true, in all the European major conferences, about half of the keynote speakers are Americans. Makes sense because you saw the earlier list. Most of the famous ones are Americans. Okay, so far so good. But I said, some problems we should solve ourselves. there are a few things, just a few, that we in Europe know more about than the fantastic people in America. I'll give you an example. Geography. This is the Netherlands. I told you before, I think. Yeah. So this is the Netherlands. Just 2 years ago, somebody said, "Oh, you're from the Netherlands. Oh, that's so great. Do you know Johan Christensen in Copenhagen?" That's Denmark. The Netherlands, Denmark. The Netherlands, Amsterdam, Denmark, Copenhagen, right? So I said, no, I don't know Johan Christensen in Denmark, but do you know Pablo Gonzalez in Mexico? He was offended. I don't get it. It was just a question. Like, he asked me a question, I asked him a question. He was offended. I don't get it. So this is the kind of stuff that Americans are not good at. European geography, okay, fair enough. Different languages, diversity, etc. So I told my fellow Europeans, we have some of our problems for ourselves that we have to solve ourselves. Yeah, let's start solve our problems ourselves. We're Europeans. We don't need Americans for our problems. This is exactly what I needed, right? So this is the identity stuff at work. So we created this logo as an alternative to the European flag. This is supposed to be a Belgian beer glass. These big Belgian beer glasses that I see everywhere around me where I live nowadays. Interestingly enough, the French think it is a wine glass. No surprise there. The British think it is the Holy Grail. I'm fine with that. The Irish say, what a strange whiskey glass. And the Russians don't care as long as it fits as long as you can drink vodka out of it, so that they are fine with anything. By the way, this is France. This is France, the big country there, though the French themselves think that this is what Europe looks like. This is the UK, United Kingdom, the British. That's where they are, though they themselves think it's like this. And this is the Irish. They have their opinion of what Europe looks like is actually quite accurate. And this big one over there is Russia. So, other example, clean code. Does anyone have this bracelet? Uncle Bob was here yesterday. Ah, yeah, I see a few of them. Awesome. He does exactly the same thing. He is using identity there to change people's behaviors. I can imagine what happens. If you sit there at your computer and it's nearly 5 o'clock and you're just about to finish the class that you've been writing and you think, oh, I actually don't have time to write the unit test, let's ship this crap. And then you see the bracelet and you think, oh my God, what is Uncle Bob going to do with me if he finds out, right? I should be a clean coder. So you write the unit test anyway and Uncle Bob says, you're a good guy. This is identity at work. He does exactly the same thing. All right, that was the second I. Then the third one, incentives, also an important one. This is how we train animals. This is how we teach children. We give them small rewards for good behaviors. Ooh, you peed on the potty, how good of you, here is a cookie. And then they drink more water and start peeing more. Oh, another cookie, oh, drink more water. Oh. Once they found out how the system works, and then you have to come up with something else. But the scientists say this can work, right? It can work if the rewards are very small, because then the chance of people going for the rewards instead of simply developing their behaviors is relatively small. You do not give them like a $100 million bonus for peeing on the potty, right? Because that will change people's behavior in a very bad way. But the small rewards are okay, and that's, as I said, that's how we train animals as well. It went wrong with this country, Iceland, far away, where they had some banks. Well, you have some experience with that here in the US as well, I'm afraid. Yeah. But, well, the people in Iceland, they also have some experience, and some greedy people in the Netherlands, I admit, sorry about that. some of my fellow countrymen, greedy, and storing all their money on the Icelandic banks without realizing that the banks in Iceland stored all their vaults inside the volcanoes. Right? You remember what happened to the volcano? Whoosh, there all the money went. Gone. So we're trying to push the island even more away. Safe distance, not investing it anymore in that country. So incentives, that can work. It is dangerous territory, but useful. Number 4, infrastructure. That's a useful one, and the one that I added, because sometimes you can change the physical infrastructure to tweak people's behaviors, to influence people's behaviors. There was a good article in Harvard Business Review just a few weeks ago where they said they actually did research following people with behaviors and all the interactions and conversations that they had with little gadgets, and they could actually measure the impact of small changes in the environment, the impact that those changes had on their collaboration. And simply doing things like lengthening the lunch tables had a big effect, because then they forced people to lunch together instead of sitting on their own. Very small things like that, or turning people around so that they were facing each other in the office instead of looking at each other's backs. Small tweaks in the environment. One of my favorite examples is Schiphol Airport. Was rated the #1 airport in Europe, best airport. They are masters at changing people's behaviors, influencing their behaviors, making sure that everyone first ends up in the shops and then go to the gates. That's what they're very good at. Remember, Schiphol Airport, Amsterdam, the Netherlands. That's this one, right? Remember? Okay. Have I offended anyone yet? Am I doing a good job here? You know, there's this expression that I find all over the world that says stepping on someone's toes. You have that expression here, right? Yes, you know what it is. They have similar ones in other countries. In our country, we have the reverse expression. I'm not making this up. We have the reverse expression. We say, other people have long toes. It's so easy to step on. Isn't that amazing? We have just the opposite perspective. Oh my God, I have offended someone. Ooh, long toes, we say to each other. J.B. Rainsberger, a Canadian, he told me if only everyone was Dutch in the whole world, things would be so much simpler. We simply knew what we were thinking. I would simply know what other people were thinking, but unfortunately, only the Dutch are Dutch, and the rest, well, we'll have to cope with. All right. Institutions, that's the last I of the 5. Institutions. This is a picture of the guilds in Brussels on the market square. They sell expensive chocolates there now to unsuspecting American tourists who do not know that the really good chocolates are somewhere else. I know that. They're not there. Well, anyways, the guilds are good examples of self-organizing entities. They formed themselves a couple of centuries ago and did things like establish practices for carpenting. If you're a carpenter in this area, then these are the rules and ideas and practices we have for carpenting. Otherwise, you should not do carpenting. It started out as a good idea. Unfortunately, when politics got involved, then things turned bad and sour, but the original idea was good. We can have something similar in organizations with communities of practice, we call them. People self-organizing, working together across multiple teams, across multiple projects, and then establishing some common sense practices, some standards that we share with each other. If you do TDD on multiple project, well, these are the kinds of platforms that we're going to use. And we'll try to standardize stuff across the organization with our community of practice. I found out, that's interesting, that Spotify, the online music company that is very, very popular in Europe, they actually call their communities of practice guilds over there. They actually call them guilds. Very interesting. Same idea. So the institutes that are referred to in this model, they are these self-organized entities that can define the rules without management having to be involved. Management can delegate that stuff to those institutes, to those guilds. So that's the 5th one. the fifth I. And together this is about changing the environment, because it is sometimes very hard to change people individually without having an operating table and very expensive equipment. Then it may be easier to work on the environment. Change the environment instead of changing the people. Now this is a very important quote that I found in John Cotter's book, because the number one reason for failed agile adoption, as you may remember, the number one was organizational culture, a bad fit with organizational culture. Well, and then some people ask me the question, how do I change the organization's culture? Because it doesn't fit with what is needed. Well, Cotter said, the culture changes only when you've successfully altered people's actions, and when the new behavior produces a group benefit for a period of time. So basically, Cotter said, you should be doing everything that Jurgen says, and if you're successful at it, and is sustainable over a long period of time, you will have changed the organization's culture. It is actually a lot of work. So, last list of questions. If you have an interesting challenge, like trying to get people to come to your conference, for example, well, here's a lot of questions that you have to ask yourself. How do you radiate information? Is there some kind of identity thing going on that you can take into account, that you can have worked to your advantage? Can you make use of some peer pressure? Can you incentivize the good behaviors with small rewards? Can you remove all the barriers that people find along the way and put some guides in place like they do in Schiphol Airport? And are there some institutes there that can define the rules, like you really should go to that conference because that's what we expect as a community of practice? I now call that Change Management 3.0 because this is not in the Management 3.0 book. I came up with all this stolen stuff after the book came out. So as a tongue-in-cheek reference, I call it Change Management 3.0, and it consists of 4 parts, as you've seen. Be a systems thinker, you do it on and on and on, again and again. It never stops. Number 2, people have to change at the individual level. Sending messages is not enough, that's just awareness. That's one of 5 things that you need to do. The rest is important as well. At the same time, work on the environment. That might even be easier than working on the people themselves. And realize that you're following a curve. You may need different approaches depending on where you are. So you have to understand that. How far is your change approach in the system? So I turned this into a very little book called How to Change the World. It is on Kindle and on paper and in PDF. You can check it out if you want. It's only 80 pages, just a few dollars. But some people have been asking for a full text of this keynote. And of course, a 30-second promo. Yes, I will be in Chicago in a few weeks. I hope to see some of you there because I'm going to talk about lots of more things and do lots of interesting games on 14th and 15th of June. So if you want to check it out, go to the Lean Dog guys because they're organizing it with me. All right, that was my discussion for today. I hope I was not offensive to the people here in the room, and to end with a serious note, this is all part of changing the world as far as I'm concerned. Because I think for good reasons that this talk is very, very popular in Europe because of the way I present things and because I make fun of everything and I don't take myself very serious all the time, and that's exactly what people like. This is the best way to broadcast a good message, and I hope you agree with that. So thank you for listening, and maybe some of you have some questions.
Thanks a lot. All right, we have a couple mics here. Who has a question? I know it's late, but you still
It's late.
To the IT Martini.
I won't blame you.
15 minutes. There won't be anyone there.
Yeah, I see a hand over there. Thank you.
Do you see any evidence of Management 3.0 actually being adopted?
Do I have evidence of Management 3.0 being adopted? Well, at the individual practice level, yes. I get messages from people who tell me that they have played delegation poker, that they have an authority board in the room. There was a tweet just 2 days ago that some teams were using the moving motivators, the intrinsic desires. thing that I turned into an exercise to assess diversity on a team, and the feedback is always positive. Of course, I cannot measure how much it is really transforming organizations, but at least people are having fun trying, and that's the best I can do for now, I suppose. So that's as far as I am. Thank you. Good question.
Others?
Other questions? Yeah.
What do you think about sugar coating as a real Dutch?
What do I think about sugar coating as in a team?
A real Dutch.
Being a real Dutch. Well, please explain sugar coating to me, because in my interpretation is padding something with sugar and then it makes it easily consumable. But is that what you mean? How do you mean that in a team context?
All good job all the time, regardless of the results. Right? You tried your best. Good job.
Ah, okay. So you say you're telling people you tried your best, you did a good job, and then you're not really confronting them with what's really necessary. Well, that wouldn't work on a Dutch team, I can tell you that. I was a bit demotivated a number of years ago because people complaining all the time in a company where I worked. This was bad and that was bad and this sucked, etc., etc. So I thought, okay, considering that I'm the manager, I will do an assessment of people's happiness, and I used Gallup's 12 questions for that. And it turned out that people were actually quite happy. They were just quite happy. They were just complaining all the time. Typically Dutch, right? Always pointing at the few things that aren't perfect yet, right? So we don't have that problem in my country. But I know it is a different issue in other countries. I've been in China, I've been in France, and they tell me, well, it's much harder to tell people what you're really thinking of what they've done. It's not politically correct and things like that. I do not have personal experience with that. I'm Dutch. I tell them, oh, this sucks, dude. Do something about it. More useful. And as J.B. Rainsberger said, he wished everyone was Dutch, because you make progress more easily. Yes, it turns into a verbal fight every now and then, because then things settle down and you have a beer and everything is back to normal. I don't have much experience with working on teams where people do not tell each other what's really going on. And I think this is part of trust and respect and transparency in a real Agile organization. So I think we're blessed being Dutch. Of course, I can exaggerate things. You can let people know in more subtle ways what you think of what they've delivered or not. But you don't have to do it the Dutch way. But still, you have to confront them in some way or another. The confrontation was one of the words that Chris this morning showed in his slide. So no sugarcoating or thinner layers of sugar, I would say. Yeah. Difficult question there for me. Thanks. Other questions? Not as difficult as this one, hopefully. None? All right, well, let's call it a day and go out to have a drink. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, this talk is actually 2 times longer, but I cut all the jokes about Americans. Just kidding.